And we're back, and we're moving into our first conversation for this morning as we catch up with what's happening in the agricultural sector. We're joined this morning by CEO in the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Forestry and Environment, Jose Alpuche, and we have Milagro Matus with us, who is a policy analyst in the ministry as well. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you for having us.
Very important sector that perhaps we don't talk about enough. And I'm really grateful that you're here so that we can find out exactly what's happening. I know there are a few projects that are being undertaken by the ministry, and especially moving from the farm into the digital realm. But before that, I want to talk a bit about some of the things that we are seeing in terms of what's been in the news. And I want to give you a chance to update on that. So recently, we've had a few sectors of farmers come out and complain about importation licenses and about an abundance of crop in their farms that they can't sell. Let's start off with what was the potato, and now we hear of soybean. And it seems, and I want to ask you if it's kind of generalized issue that the ministry seems to be battling.
The issue of potato, quite frankly, was a rather unfortunate one. Unfortunate in the sense that it was a made-for-TV event. We had not even properly commenced harvest, and I believe, as the Chief Agriculture Officer clarified in a later press release, the group in San Carlos should not even have been harvesting if they had followed on the agreement with the stakeholders at that point in time. So this notion that potatoes were already out in the field rotting is as wrong as it could be. Simply put, how can it be rotting if you haven't even started harvesting? So it was a rather unfortunate event that this took wings. What it shows, though, is that we will have a bumper crop. The weather's been very good. And we're pushing very hard. I believe there's another stakeholder consultation in another week or so to try to discuss with farmers where we will go with the potato harvest, because we will have quite a bit.
Well, I agree. I don't think the story as it was aired showed rotting potatoes in the field, but I think what it did was trigger stories from the past where we know there was an excess of potatoes in the market, where the farmers were trying to get them sold before they started to rot. And I think the larger issue here is looking at what's allowed to come in when we have farmers harvesting within our own country.
Well, I've said over and over again that it's always a bit of a delicate balance at the beginning and at the end of any crop, because production does not go from zero to your full production immediately. There's always a curve going up, it peaks, and then it begins coming down, and that's with every produce. So we do have a little bit of a balancing act there. The issue of importation on that one, I think the dates were given that we had stopped importing, I believe the 22nd of January or something like that, and the harvest had started in February. So the local production should have matched with the importation. What we have is a phenomenon that the ministry has very little control over, which is contraband. And unfortunately, contraband is really becoming a serious issue. But we have no legal authority we, meaning the ministry, have no legal authority to go and fight contraband. That's the border agencies that have to deal with it, and there's close collaboration with them to try to push for the fight against contraband. But the ultimate fight against contraband is what I keep on saying every time I come on the show, Marlene, which is agriculture as a business. It has to be based on quality, it has to be based on consistency of supply, and it has to be based on a competitive price. And it is that gap in the competitive price that creates the drive for contraband. If there is no economic opportunity in the contraband, it will not occur. So our focus from the ministry's perspective is to try to bring the numbers down as much as possible for the farmers, to allow them to compete, especially when the market is about to close or when it's about to open. That's when we have difficulties.
Can I understand when you said made for TV, do you mean that it was mischief, malicious, or just greed? Are you saying it's greed? Why did they come on TV to say, according to your position?
I think you have to look at who invited them to.
So you say it's politics?
Yes.
Political. And there was no truth in it, it's just political.
Well, in the fact that they could not sell, I can't remember the numbers, but I thought it was something like 20 bags of potato they said they went to the market with, and they sold 12 or something like that. So it was really a bit of a trivial, if I should be real, grandstanding at the expense of farmers. Look, we are open to dialogue, we're open to constant dialogue with anybody, including the politicians, to see how best we can serve the farmers. The door is open, call. You don't have to go to these extremes to create these sorts of events where they don't exist. Because what it does really is undermine confidence in the farming community.
Well, how does that liaising take place the other way around? Because I think what is clear is that you don't want, we've talked so many times about the need for people to look at agriculture as a potential business, those who are already involved and those who are interested. But there has to be some knowledge that, as in any business, that your investment will come with a return. And if I go out and I harvest whatever produce there is, I want to know that I can go into the market and have fair competition. Contraband is one thing, but if it's being imported legally, then I'm not being given fair play. So what's the relationship that takes place between those who are producing locally and those who are granting the licenses for anything to be imported?
Well, as I said, with the potato issue, there was no issue as it relates to legal importation because the license had expired already. Yeah. We do have stakeholder dialogue, the commodity group meetings, onions, potatoes, and others, to try to do the projections. One of the reasons why we're talking digitization is for us exactly to get better at what we're doing, to utilize digital means to be able to do something we've never been able to do in this country, which is a forecast supply balance. So that's what we're striving to do in the data collection and the new systems that we're putting in place.
How do you currently get your forecasts?
By visits with the farmers, through extension, through farmer details, contact farmers providing us with the details. So there is already a system. There's a lot that needs to be done to perfect the system. But on the issue of overproduction, which I believe we will have, as I said, a bumper supply for potatoes, we can only advise. We can't force the farmers and tell them you have to plant X, Y, or Z. And there's, again, another suggestion coming out that because we control seed importation, we should be able to control what the farmer plants. Man, that's some command economic communist era, things that we can't operate in. We're trying to provide a business environment for the farmer to thrive. All that we can do is to advise them. And that's where we're trying to develop better systems.
How do you mitigate a problem that you are already forecasting? Because a bumper crop would mean that you have excess.
That's where we have to dialogue with the farmers, and we have to see how best we can deal with it. Better storage, better curing of things like potatoes and onions at harvest actually can extend the life of the product. So that's one of the dialogue that we need to have with them.
Can I ask just generally, just to grade your progress, because there must be some legitimate criticism in terms of the work that the ministry is doing and what the ministry can do more, because I'm sure you'll agree with me that the ministry can do a lot more. But when you look at the macro picture, the ministry has been a troublesome one over the years. We've had problems with limes, potatoes, onions, rice, sugar, sugarcane. We've had almost, with every major crop, we've had an issue over the years.
Show me a country in this world where we don't have...
No, please.
Understand. No, but show me a country in the world where you don't have this difficulty with the peaks and troughs of production. That's what the commodity markets, why they're established, That's why sugar prices go up and come down. It's a reality in terms, you're dealing with nature, and even the most advanced economies don't have it down to a T. Do we have room for improvement in the ministry? There is always room for improvement in everything that we do. And this is one of them. The issue is to bring the farmers into a more business-oriented environment. look, some of the farmers, including from San Carlos, in January, we took them to Salvador to see a system there with Accesso, where you have small farmers actually providing very high quality product to some of the multinationals like Subway and Pizza Hut and others, so they could get an understanding of how we could approach the value chain in fresh produce production. That is what they have to understand. We have an obligation to the consumers also, and it's a reality. Is it a walk in the park? Of course not, but it's a dynamic relationship that we have to see how best we improve and how we deal with it. When we enter the vagaries of politics into it, it does not help anybody, especially the farmers.
The question, though, is that politics is already in it. That the perception out there is that surely there are influences by cronies or by people who are importing who cannot tip the scales in and of itself. So to say not to put politics in it is what the farmers are trying to do, I understand it, is to try to rebalance the scales, to separate what the politics that's already in the ministry.
But you see, you're making that on one assumption.
No, I'm just
No, you're making this on one assumption, that I'm lying to you as it relates to the import license. I am telling you a statement of fact.
You wouldn't do that.
When the last importation was afforded. So it's not as if though.
Not just the potatoes, though. You understand what I'm saying generally.
Let's look at
there's no ministry that politics.
Let's look
you agree that there's no ministry in which politics doesn't play a major. This is Belize.
Yeah, I know, but what I'm trying to do is to expose it for what it is and try to inculcate with everybody, including the politicians, that we have to have a business template for the farmers to survive. But let's look at the other one as it relates to soybean. Do you know the level of importation of soybean is very minimal? Last week there was an item, and I must say Channel 5 always tries to clarify. So I must give them that much that they run, but they try to, no, not that little. I'm quite happy. No. They try to clarify what the facts are. But on this one with soybean, again, what was the story? 7 million pounds in Little Belize. You will recall that a couple of weeks ago we exported 5 containers of soy meal to Jamaica. Not soy meal, soybean crude oil. And also soybean meal to Jamaica. I have, and I forgot to bring it, but I now have the refined product that has come back in terms of sampled from Jamaica. We're working very closely, trying to facilitate that company in Jamaica to buy more from Belize. Soy definitely, but beyond soy, corn and some other products. And it's a developing dialogue that we're having with them. The point is, though, that story last week said that we're issuing import license. I checked with our people, I checked with suppliers control, what's the true fact? The fact is that we've brought in very, very little. I can tell you right now that we have a request for importation of soybean meal. From who? From the Mennonite community, one of them up north. It's the Mennonite community that produces. It's the Mennonite community that usually imports usually soybean meal for feed, for poultry. It's a balancing between the farmers. Let me go at a wider macro problem that we have. A couple years ago, the community of Spanish Lookout bought a large tract of land. Equally, Little Belize bought a large tract of land. So what has happened is that this land, financed by the banks, now needs to go into productive use so that they could pay back, which is generally the way things are done. What we have right now is a bit of a systemic problem there, where to try to recover, there's a lot of planting without the level of planning that's required. We can only help. At the end of the day, the farmers decide where they want to go. And knowing your background, you need to recall too that the ministry...
In law.
Yeah. Knowing your background, you will recall that the ministry has been taken to court at least on 2 occasions. And we have Supreme Court rulings limiting how we can intervene. You will recall that with the Citrus and the Sugar Act being challenged, we were told by the court that, look, the farmers have the right to freedom of association. And also, too, they have the right to economic freedom. So we have constraints as to how far we can go in dealing with them. All that we can do is to advise, to try to create the best possible business environment for them.
Now, I think it's highly understated the importance of the agricultural sector in this country. And in fact, you moved from what was one of or greatest income earner for a very long time to now below tourism, which is still good news because we're happy that tourism is doing good. But there's a stability issue, and I think that's where I hear some of the issues that we're talking about here. And what I assume to be a move to formalize, or at least to have more baseline data as to what exists in terms of who's planting what, who's developing what, in all parts of the country. So I want to move into that because you're doing what is considered an agriculture census. And I want you to tell me a bit about how that has been going so far and the reliability of the data as well.
Right. So this year we started with, actually last year we developed BAIMS, the Belize Agriculture Information Management System. Like CEO was telling you all that it was developed by a local consultant from Corozal. So we're very proud of that, that our own Belizeans are supporting the development of the agriculture sector. So BAIMS is a central repository for data. We use it to store, analyze, and retrieve information. It stores farm information, a basic profile of the farmer, the farm, the GPS coordinate of the farm, and then production. The census is a one-off activity basically to register all farmers. We are intending to complete that activity by June. So right about now we're calling all farmers to either register by going through the office, or the enumerators that are on the floor are registering by district. The intention, of course, like CEO Alpuche mentioned, is to be able to do forecast supply balance. At any point in time, we're able to tell who is a farmer, where you're located, and what your production is. All the commodities you produce, and then at what point in production you are.
It's self-reported?
No. At this point, we are intending to use contact farmers, because after we do the census, we'll be able to identify all the farmers and what particular commodities they do. The intention is to be able to group farmers by commodity, by different locations, and then identify contact farmers, and so be able to relay information into the system. Of course, as we move into the future, we intend to be able to make more use of technology, but at this point, we are slowly trying to organize farmers and get into this system of thinking that data is important for planning. I believe in particular commodities like potato, carrots, and onions, we have been able to have a control in terms of data. What happens, like CEO says, sometimes we cannot control what a farmer intends to do. We tell them, listen, if you plant X amount, as a group, if you plant this amount, you're going to have a bumper crop. No, we can only advise them. But our responsibility is to be able to give them data, to be able to tell them, if you do certain things, these are the outcomes. That is our responsibility. What they choose to do on the ground is another story. So the intention is to be able to always have data available for them to be able to make planning decisions, and for us to be able to also make decisions in terms of import licenses.
And who cross-reference the data? Because that's one of the things, if you're using GPS, if you're going out and...
To answer your question about self-reporting, some of it will have to be self-reporting, because the macro picture, again, on the ministry, we have 54 agriculture technicians to cover the entire country. So we do have limitations, and that's why we have to rely on technology to fill some of the gaps that we have. What we would do is to indeed, through this a system of clusters and contact farmers to report, we will have to go and do periodic surveys to ensure that the quality of the data that we're getting is correct. So this is not only a system. It is a new way of operating that we have to adjust to, meaning the ministry, but also to the farmers need to adjust to, so that we could get precise data, analyze, and turn that data out back into the farmers in a more timely manner than we're doing at this point in time.
And what's been the buy-in from the farmers?
Well, there's a lot of benefits to being part of the system. One of that is being able to be supported, especially during times of natural disaster. There's a drought, there's flood, hurricane, etc. We're easily able to identify the farming areas, or especially the farmers who are affected. As you know, during times of national emergency, we have 12 hours to pick up data to identify farms that are affected. So it is very difficult to be able to identify, especially those who need it the most. Areas or farms that are affected. So that is one of the first benefits. Another benefit would be that they would have a national identification card. So when they're moving product from district to district, they're easily identified by the police officers, customs officers, etc., that there are legitimate farmers. We are also intending to, in the future, with the data that we're collecting, we're intending to use the GPS coordinates to be able to do drainage and irrigation planning to support them in that regard, to identify areas that need either drainage or irrigation technology.
How does this help with the larger picture, what we just pointed out, the stability of the sector?
Providing data, a forecast supply balance is something where we give a better tool to the farmer to decide, look, I will plant X, Y, or Z because it's being planted elsewhere in the country.
So what you're saying is someone in Orange Walk may be planting, I don't know, pineapples, and they don't know someone in Barranco is planting as well.
Exactly.
So when all our pineapples go onto the market, it's more than Belize consumes.
We do a planting survey, then we do during crop survey, and then we do post-production surveys. And from there, we'd be able to look at the trends a little bit more. But as I said, even from the pre-planting survey, you would be able to send out something to farmers to suggest that this is what the planting plans look like, and they would be able to adjust based on that. As I said, even in the more sophisticated countries, you don't have linear production, because all that we can do is to provide advice. One of the things that we're hoping to do is to better group the farmers, for them to understand that it's better in their interest for them to group into however small, however big, however deep, however loose, but for them to group, to plan a little bit better. Let me say that complementary to this, which is one of our digitization effort, we also have the Ifad project that we signed on to last year, where 23 communities in the country will be looked at in a holistic manner, from infrastructure to agronomic practices, and try to push them to become more climate resilient. But in that push to get them more climate resilient, a core of it is coordination for them to be able to form clusters. And another part of it would be that we would be getting the level of information and establishing the links there. On that IFAD loan, I'm happy to say that a few days ago we got confirmation that the GCF will now match with another $8 million US for that program. So we're hoping that pilot, we will be able to upscale that pilot considerably.
And what is the difference between this project and what is being traditionally done in a farm? What is the big change that you're talking about?
Because this is holistic. Sorry, you are going to say?
When are we going to start seeing the impact of these systems?
Well, these internationally funded projects, especially like the IFAD one, takes a little while. We just started the implementation. I had hoped we would be seeing impact by now, but we have to go through a couple more studies, yes. So I think early next year we'll begin seeing implementation. Actually, one of my concerns is for us to try to find additional bridging funds to do some of what needs to be done. But what is different with this one, Marlene, is that I'll give you an idea of Nagobank in the Belize district. There's a final 3 kilometer of road where the farmers plant that really should be built. And we're hoping that this project will be able to go in from a climate resilient standpoint, look at putting in a road that will not be subjected to flooding, etc., deal with water supply, try to push them towards a more undercover structure, etc., production, etc. And then, of course, the linkage to market too. So it's a comprehensive approach than what has been usually the realm of only agriculture, going and doing the agronomic side and then hoping that somebody comes along and build the road.
Yeah. Now, you talk of climate resilience, and there's several things I'm thinking of I asked about stability, and I understand that globally there are always issues. So you have some agriculture-related setbacks, like your citrus greening or your bacterial infection at the shrimp farm, and you have some non-agricultural issues like what happened with the banana farms. But my challenge is, how do you plan for an industry, understanding that these setbacks have major implications on our economy? And I'm thinking of climate resilience specifically, where we've had droughts in the past, we've had issues that actually translate into, I think, challenges people can understand. The cost of irrigation systems for a farm, for example, and you don't know whether or not there'll be a drought, you don't know whether you'll need it, because just nobody can really predict.
No, we're in a very robust dialogue right now with the World Bank, and it's not very easy. But one of the things we're trying to get accepted is the concept of a disaster recovery fund, not insurance. Insurance for our farming community is way too expensive, so we have to work on a disaster recovery fund. The reality is, though, that the World Bank and most others want to push you towards commercial solutions. What we're trying to say to them is that those commercial solutions don't exist in an economy.
What are commercial solutions?
Parametric risk insurance offered by the insurance companies. It is very expensive.
Parametric risk, you just lost me.
Sorry.
Like insuring your crop. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, to insure your crop.
Okay.
The parametric is just the parameters that you will set that will trigger what a disaster is. Sorry, I'm talking in
Yes, mystics.
yeah, but it's expensive and it's not affordable for most of the farmers. We need to find an intermediary, and we've been having this dialogue for quite some time, and we're pushing them to do it. We've done some work with the World Bank. They're beginning to understand a little bit better, but it's not an easy process. But that's one thing. The reality of climate change is real. We do have some residual impacts in the banking system in Belize all the way back from the 2013 rains and the 2014 drought. Do you remember that event? And it is a reality that we absolutely have to address. But we're pushing it. We need the support of many others than just including the commercial banks. And coming back to one of the things that you were saying as it relates to managing the issues. We've been in very close dialogue with the shrimp industry to try to see them recover. We've also, in that process, gotten them together, gotten the central bank and their bankers together, that we all have to find a solution. Yeah. And that template has worked fairly well for the shrimp industry. That is what we hope to employ with the grain producers and the wider agriculture community. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that was really my next question. I think where, from a ministry level, while I appreciate what I hear you talking about for in gathering your data from the farmers, there's also a role in terms of moving towards policy or legislation and collaborating with other entities to make the life of a farmer easier, essentially. And one of the things that we continuously hear is access to finance. You know, there are some companies, we know DFC has some funds for that, but for most farmers, they have challenges in being able to access finances, understanding the risks that are associated with the sector itself. So how do you, where are you in terms of being able to build that dialogue? Mitigating the risk is where we can help the farmers, because the banks sit quite comfortably and demand 9%. We can shout as much as we want that, oh, you need to reduce that to 7 or to 5. But if we don't help the sector to mitigate the risk, the banks will be slow to respond. So that's a part of what we're doing with digitization. That's the information. Another element that we will do with digitization is virtual marketing, virtual trading platform. We're loosely calling it the Craigslist for agriculture in Belize, where anybody would be able to say, I have X to sell, and you would... Like online shopping for agriculture products? Yes. So we're working on that. But in the bigger picture, one of the things we've been pushing for quite some time is for us to do the LIDAR survey of the entire country. LIDAR gives you a wealth of information, but the one that we're interested in right now is topographic. Our topographic maps right now are 1 in 20. They're not precise. A LIDAR survey, a digital topographic map of the country, will give you literally within inches. With that information, with computer programs already available, we would be able to help the mass of the farmers with things like water management. It's an expensive project, but we're trying to see if we can get it done along with the Climate Change Center and some others in terms of collaborating with them to do the national survey. That would put us at a very, very high level. But keep in mind what we're doing in the survey right now. We're taking the georeference, the GPS location of every farm. So you need assistance in your farm, I would be able to look at where you are from a GPS location, look at my digital topographic map, utilize the software that we will, and I could easily, through a desktop assessment, better advise you on your drainage and irrigation and the entire water management scheme. Mm-hmm. I would be able to show you your farm far better than you've been able to look at it in the past and than I've been able to look at it. So that's where we're going. Mm-hmm. The other element are things, and the LiDAR survey, the digital maps, we're calling them, those are really foundation technologies that we have to put in place. Yeah. The other one is to correct the GPS. You know, this thing has about a 20-meter offset that we need to correct that. So we're working on another program to try to get the cores, the ground beacons in the country to correct that, so that we could truly begin to digitize the process.
Mm-hmm. So for the layperson who's out there hearing all these big words and fancy talk, how does this benefit them? What will they see that they can say?
It comes back to what, to answering.
On a real way.
No, it comes
will this
back.
mean that they will always have potato salad on Saturday? Will this always mean that they have rice and beans?
Which
what
potato?
Specifically?
The red one, and not the dyed red one, the natural occurring red one.
Which people say nicer.
It is. I will say that in all honesty, it is. It is the consistency far better than the white one. But that's another story all by itself. The issue is mitigating the risk, providing the environment for them to make money. That's what we're trying to do. If we can, with a level of better certainty, deal with the vagaries of climate change, better policies on irrigation, etc. You know that after the 2013, 2014 disaster, government has been granting duty-free, tax-free importation of irrigation equipment to farmers. Mm-hmm. We need to bring that down to all levels, not only the large operators, but even the smaller operators. And we're doing these things, implementing quite a lot of this quietly. How can we help the farmer to make more money? That's at the base. But in making more money, also to satisfying the demands of the consumer. That's at the core. Mm-hmm. And that's everything that we do. We're trying to push them towards that goal.
Now, I'd imagine too, as much as you want to ease the burdens of the farmers that are in the industry, you're looking at expansion as well. I mean, we're still importing things that we can produce here. Where have you seen a growth in the interest in the sector? Are people looking at niche markets as to how to export?
One of the sectors that I will readily admit to you we've not developed in the past that we should have is with the Agri Processing. And right now we have the FAO and a team from the University of Trinidad and Tobago looking at the gaps and coming up with a plan for us as it relates to expanding agro processing. That's one of the growth areas that we really believe we can cash in on. Mm-hmm. Why? You're using, in addition to base production, you're using excess production. You could easily convert to a shelf-stable product, but it's also too far easier to export the processed or the semi-processed product than raw. Mm-hmm.
There's more money too.
Yeah, usually there's less shipping. So taking it up the value chain a little bit helps. I mean, we're seeing this step from exporting crude oil to now bringing back the refined crude oil, and that really sells the concept of the single market, the CARICOM single market, because we're sending it to Jamaica. It's being processed, some of it remains there and some of it will come back here and it will go to the rest of the region.
I'm glad you brought up CSME before we close, because we're running out of time so rapidly, because I do want to talk about sugar very quickly. And I know we saw Minister Hulse address this issue, but I do want to get an update. So what the situation is that there are challenges from the sugar industry in getting our products out into CARICOM. And this, I think, if anybody has been paying attention to the purpose and the goals and the ideologies behind CSME, seems to fly right in the face of what that vision was. Tell me,
You-
what is the update from the
you're-
Ministry of Agriculture?
You're right. First and foremost, there's a strategic decision taken that for us to survive in the long term, we have to move our production from raw sugar exports to the direct consumption sugars.
Which is like our table sugar.
It goes right, it's just exactly what I was explaining earlier, taking it up a bit notch higher up the value chain. But with the direct consumption sugar, in effect, you can export it just about anywhere because it is something that's ready to be consumed, either human or industrial use. What we have in CARICOM right now, and it's to try to apply the CET on the imported white sugar. This has existed in the past where we used to export all the raws into Europe. Now we need to try and put the lid back on something that's been in place for a while. But the real issue right now is not so much the CET, it's the price of sugar at the core. And
So what are you saying? Our sugar is too expensive?
No, dump prices on the global market right now are extremely low, and we're being impacted by that. But the Ministry of Trade, the Ministry of Agriculture, the stakeholders, BSI, Santander, and even the farmers, we're all in this to try to push for the application of the CET. Will it be an overnight thing? The answer is no. CARICOM does not work that way. But we believe we will have a much more understanding discussion as the prices for sugar creep up a bit. Because right now it's a question of price, to be honest.
So what are the other options at this point? Because we know without the preferential access that we used to have, there has been an ongoing discussion about finding new markets. It seems quite logical that we ship at least just across the Caribbean Sea versus going out much further. What are the other options?
We started a discussion with Taiwan to see whether they would take direct consumption sugar, and we're looking at other markets to see what the possibilities are. Again, if there was an overnight solution, it would be had, but these are things that will take a little while. But keep in mind the level of DCs, the direct consumption sugar being produced needs to increase anyhow. So we're in step with attempting to secure the markets with the investments being put in. You recall that a week or two ago, probably 2 weeks ago, the IDB extended a loan to ASR to do precisely that. Yeah. So we are in step to try to make it work.
Now, just before we close off, I think if you spoke of the agricultural census, which is fascinating. I think we think of household census all the time. We don't think of farming census. But what would you tell people are the short-term goals that you see yourself achieving? Because I understand that there's a long-term vision in place, but people just want to see in dollars and cents or in an immediate change that, okay, something is working for me. What are these short-term goals that you've set out that people can see realized in the near future?
Rearranging the market. It's a dynamic living process. You will recall, again, a year and a half ago, we had run the trials of the farmers market in Belmopan. We still have that facility. That had not gone the way we had expected because the farmers were not confident enough to supplement with other products. But we've started a dialogue with them after the Salvador trip, and as late as, not last week, the Friday before, a team of us, we've been going around the country, but I visited the meeting in St. Margaret 2 Fridays ago, where we're offering to the farmers, look, let's start this again. Try to bring the farmers direct to the marketplace. If we can organize the domestic market, especially for the small producers, that will yield them some of the immediate benefits as the census data come on stream, as the system of the forecast supply balance and BAIMS come on stream, as the virtual market place comes on stream. I think in the not too distant future, we'll begin having a better consolidation of the marketplace. Related to that will be some of the other issues as they relate to
Can I ask my final
importation.
question, which is, what is the next step? What is the revolutionization of the agricultural sector? What is the next step beyond just this colonial thing of sugar and rice? What is the next step forward so that we can produce a product which attracts a niche, where we can be like El Salvador, where we are exporting to Subway and these people? What is the next step? Rather than doing business as usual, what is the revolutionary step?
I was happy. That's a very valid and wide-ranging question, but I was happy to see when I went to Super Selector in Salvador, along with the farmers, Murray Sharp was up here, and Tabasco was down here, which is in the past, it used to be the other way around. Murray Sharp, quality, consistency, and you have a product that can sell. That is where the revolution will occur. That's one of the areas that I tell you that I will readily admit we've been weak, and we're trying to develop capacity along with the private sector. The growth potential for the foods that we produce in this country are phenomenal. With that, we need a much deeper dialogue with the importation of finished product. The other day, I made a comment on one of my Mr. Tate, one of our statisticians, said to me when I made the statement that we import too much ramen noodles. It's $11 million worth of ramen noodles coming into the country. And that's one item. So that's where the true growth
Probably one of the worst too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I agree
Well,
with
if
you
you talk about
wholeheartedly.
health,
Exactly. So it's one of the areas where we have to find, both from government but also with the private sector, with the institutions. You know, we have a school garden program going to try to push healthier eating at the school level, at that basic level. Then you're hoping that eventually you will transform into somebody who's used to eating other products. Look, there's a tremendous growth potential there. But to answer another part of the question right now, the figures that we normally see, and that's another benefit of the statistics, the figures that we normally see as output for agriculture fall way short. We know that from detailed estimates that we've done, we are well over the $600 million mark as it relates to total output. The bulk of that money remains in country. It's recirculated in country. The farmers are custodians of the rural landscape. If they would come into the city, we would have an unmanageable country. The value that they give to this country is far in excess of what is being recorded right now. With the census, with the improvement in the numbers, we'd be able to project a far better number. Keep in mind, confidence and mitigation we're sure will give them a far better business environment, give them far better returns than what they're getting right now.
All right. Well, we thank you for coming in and sharing these updates with us this morning.
Thank you too for having us.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. When we come back, we'll be joined by representatives of the Ministry of Education talking about Child Stimulation Month. So stay tuned.